A muscle is typically its weakest when it is in its shortened position. Basically in a contraction, you're at the shortened end. You're not on the stretched end, obviously. The muscle's ability to generate force is most effective when it's in its optimal length, which is considered its mid-range position. So it could generate more force. When a muscle is fully shortened completely, there's excessive overlap between the actin and myosin, which is the contractile proteins inside of a muscle, which ultimately leads to reduced force generation. Basically, when they're overlapped so much, they can't generate the force that's required when they're like here. So, now, can we strengthen the muscle when it's already in its shortened position, which is technically its weakest position? So can we change that and make it stronger? It'll still be its weakest position by definition as far as force production, but usually that's where, you're only as strong as your weakest link is the saying. So if that's the weakest part in the weakest position, what if we strengthen it when it's in that position? Think about that. When there's an injury, sometimes the muscle feels better when it's in its shortened position. Not necessarily fully contracted and under tension, but when it's in its fully, in its shortest position. That's why sometimes it feels good, like if your hamstrings are sore or whatever, that if you're just laying there and you just, bring your legs in, your leg feels good because it's not under tension and it can't generate force, which doesn't, elicit a stretch reflex or anything else going on. There's no muscle contraction issue, so it doesn't have to really worry about that. Now, inside of every muscle is something called the muscle spindle, which is pretty much its communication center, right? It's part of the muscle that basically communicates with the central nervous system to your spine, all right? We have something called the feedback loop, where we have alpha and gamma motor neurons that go from the muscle spindle to the spine and back. I forget which ones are which, so don't kill me. But sometimes when a muscle is fully shortened, that there is slack in the muscle spindle. I'm going to show you something. This is a very crude muscle that I made. White parts are your tendons, and that little black part in the middle is your muscle spindle, right?